scarf. I'm all grown up today.
Why, Kellyanne, why would the president seize interpreters' notes from the conversation with Putin, and what will it take to get the president to release those notes?
Well, the president at that time in 2017 was suffering from a great number of leaks. As you remember, I think week 1 or 2 of being here, his calls with the leaders of Mexico and Australia had leaked. He had an Oval Office meeting in May of 2017, contents of that leaked. And so there was great concern at the time. I haven't discussed this directly with him, but I will tell you that we were very concerned about, we're always concerned about leaks, obviously, particularly national security leaks. That's not funny, and that's serious business. But that's what I know about it. I believe Secretary of State Tillerson was there as well from what I learned. But I also know that Mr. Schiff is readying his subpoenas, so obviously we'll see where that goes. But I would remind you all politely, in case it somehow gets omitted from your coverage, that this president has expelled over 60 Russians from this country, closed 2 consulates. Our Treasury Department right over there has issued fresh new sanctions on Russia, at least 1 or 2 times, several times actually, and not once but twice when Assad in Syria thought it best to gas his own people, including those little babies who are struggling for the last breaths of life. This president retaliated both times. Also, we're exporting energy to our Eastern European allies. That's not good for Russia and its energy.
During that time period, then, did the president destroy notes with other world leaders, or was this exclusive to
Nobody
Putin?
said he destroyed these notes. You're saying something that you don't know is true. Nobody said he destroyed notes. You be careful about that. Be careful about that. This president has had one-on-one meetings with many different leaders, as you know. He's met one-on-one with Kim Jong-un. He's met one-on-one with Mr. Modi. He's met one-on-one with many different leaders. And I don't recall him ever leaning over in a hot mic and saying, hey, after I get reelected, I'll have more flexibility. He's very transparent to you, as you know. He gives more availability to you in a given week than, I think, frankly, any other president in modern history, if not ever.
I'm just trying to get, was this a standard practice? Was this something he did with other world leaders?
I have not been able to discuss this at length with him. So,
Kellyanne, can you give us a sense of the next steps for government shutdown talks?
Yes, well, we're here. We'd love for the Democrats to join us here. I know it's not Puerto Rico, but it's pretty out here. Hopefully there'll be no snowball fights, but we're here to negotiate. I think the president, he's been working the phones. I spoke to him several times this weekend. He obviously would like to speak to rank and file Republicans and Democrats also if the leadership won't come to the table and make a deal. I think what's very concerning to us is that in that last meeting in the Situation Room, it only lasted 14 or 15 minutes, in large part, Jeff, because the president asked Speaker Pelosi, he called her bluff and said, okay, so if we reopen the government for 30 days, would we get the wall, would we get the border security within 30? And she said no. I was sitting right there. She said no. And he said, all right. So if they're not serious about securing the border, if it's 300 Americans who have died from heroin overdoses every single week, we're up to over 1,000 since this inability, I think, just intransigence to secure the border and provide the funding for DHS started. Over 1,000 Americans have died of heroin overdoses, if you look at it that way, 300 a week times 24 days, 23 days. Then it's very concerning because they're not being serious. Just fund DHS. Get the Customs and Border Patrol agents what they say they need. DHS gave us this list. We didn't make it up. Donald Trump didn't come up with a list. Mike Pence didn't come up with a list. They're telling us we need more personnel at the border. We need electronics. We need other surveillance mechanisms. We need more immigration judges. We have an 800,000 case backlog in our immigration court. So we need that. We also need to meet these humanitarian needs. There's billions in there for detention beds. So all of that is in there. And if we only talk about wall, we're not being honest about, number one, what Customs and Border Patrol and DHS has said they need, and number two, what the package includes completely.
But the Democrats are also saying that
suggestion from Lindsey Graham that reopen for a short period of time while you negotiate.
Well, he certainly listens to Senator Graham, Chairman Graham, and they have got a great working relationship. The president, to this moment, has not been receptive to that particular proposal, but he does have these dual goals of securing our border, our southern border, a sovereign nation with physical barriers. I hear many, and of course reopening the government, I hear many Democrats now increasingly making joyful noises about border security. I know they want to call it barriers. He said, call it what you want, call it fencing barriers. I took great note that last week, everyone from Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York to Congressman John Sarbanes of Maryland to Senator Chris Coons of Delaware all talked about barriers or fencing or reinforcing what we've got there or being open to having a physical barrier. In no one's rational mind can we say that we would have border security without some kind of physical barrier that you can't crawl under or walk around, drive through, or climb over. So we need that in addition to all these other very important metrics. So,
Kellyanne,
yes.
So the position then, to be clear, is just that if there's no money for the wall, then he will not give his approval to reopen the government.
Well, there is money for the wall and the barriers, the steel slat fencing. Francesca, it's called the $5.7 billion that the House passed before Christmas. All the Senate has to do, is match that. That is such a minuscule, infinitesimal percentage of our overall federal budget. I mean, we can't invest in our nation's security, thusly, or border security is national security. It's such a small percentage of our nation's, the overall federal budget. And we should look at it that way too. So the president wants all of those items that are included in the border security package, but of course it includes a physical barrier. And I would say that of the 31 Democrats or so that represent districts that President Trump also won in 2016, I would ask a number of them what they think, because I've been reading their regional local press back home, and what they say there is quite different than some of the national coverage. They are telling their constituents, hey, I'm for some kind of fencing or barrier. Yes, we have to have a physical barrier. And really, if they're not, then why in the world have these Democrats voted for it in the past, 1, and 2, actually say that some of it needs to be renovated to make sure that it's not porous, that it's strong? You wanted to ask Margaret?
Thank you. So you mentioned the president would be interested in meeting with some rank and file Democrats or Republicans. Is he in fact planning on meeting with some freshman Democrats, and has that moved from idea to something actual? Has any of that been scheduled? Will he
I'll let the president or his chief of staff mention that or make those announcements if there are any announcements to make. But his phone is always ringing. He's always placing calls. He's happy to meet with anybody who is serious about border security, whether they have an R or a D or an I after their name. There's no question. And I would politely say to the ever-growing 2020 field on the Democratic side, what are you going to do in early 2019 to prove that you've got what it takes in 2020? We have a crisis at our southern border. I can't believe people are actually using the word manufactured. It's an insult to the people I've hugged and I've met whose losses will never be totally healed and compensated for, who have lost their loved ones unnecessarily to drug overdoses, to criminal aliens, killing them who shouldn't have been here in the first place, like Officer Singh, but many others. Laura Wilkinson's child, Jamil Shaw Sr.'s child, Mariam Mendoza's child. I mean, I know these people by name because they're not manufactured, they're real, and their pain is raw, and it doesn't go away. And if we can prevent that happening to other families in the future, we should do that as a nation in a very nonpartisan way. So I would ask all those folks, what are you doing in early 2019? Why are we debating over the word crisis? What is the definition of crisis? It means difficult, challenging times in need of a decision. How is that not so? There's a humanitarian crisis on this side of the border, and there's a humanitarian crisis for many of those young children on that side of the border. They shouldn't be taking that perilous journey. I don't want them to, not just as a mother and as a woman, but as just somebody who has a heart that beats and a brain that thinks and a conscience that's present, fully present. I don't want them to take that perilous journey. The president says he wants people to come here. He wants them to come legally. Mexico has offered work visas and safe passage for them, and we hope that many of them will avail themselves of that, particularly in these winter months.
Kellyanne, local law enforcement in the valley, in the Rio Grande Valley from Laredo down to Brownsville, say the president hasn't met with them and hasn't listened to what they say they need on the border.
Well, we had a lot. What do they need on the border?
Well, according to the law enforcement, I just spent
a green light, a please enter sign. What is it they need on the border?
No, what they want are more boots on the ground, more scanning equipment.
You missed the first part. You missed the first part. That's all included in there. That's okay. That's all included in there. I see I'm no longer your favorite person in the White House, which you said for such a long time. That'll keep you on your cable network. Oh, then you shouldn't lie on Twitter. Well, anyhow, but most importantly on this one, I did say before you got here, and it's very important to repeat for everyone, that the Department of Homeland Security package, the entire package and their list of goals includes any number of measures. It does include a physical barrier, steel slat barrier at the southern border, Brian, but it also includes exactly what you're saying, more personnel. These men and women are overwhelmed. The statistics, the number of family units and unaccompanied children is at an explosive all-time high. Nobody can deny that. It's just a different flow. Traditionally, it was single males from Mexico. Now it's more unaccompanied children and family units coming from the Northern Triangle countries. And it's just a different flow and a different type of passage. Instead of, as someone from CPB told me, instead of running away from trying to escape the Customs and Border Patrol, these young children and the families are running toward them. And it's just a very different, very different flow trying to be absorbed. But it's also more technology, other detection metrics and measures. It's also more immigration judges, because I read an 800,000 case backlog. They can't keep up with it either. They're overwhelmed. It's also billions to meet the humanitarian needs, about 800 million, I think, to meet the humanitarian needs. But I just saw a statistic about a lot of money for additional detention beds. So if you look at the 2-page letter that Office of Management and Budget sent to Chairman Shelby dated January 6th, it's a week ago now, you will notice on there the whole back page, the whole second page, are items that the Democrats who were sent here to negotiate with the Vice President, and others requested. It's all in there, and it's a proposal. I met with Chairman Shelby last week with the Vice President. That's a proposal. It's in there.
I get that, but what they're saying is for the last 35, 40 years, you all have played political football, both sides of the aisle.
Agreed. Agreed.
And
I think the president would agree, and I think it's part of why he got elected, Brian, because people were so sick and tired of Republicans and Democrats
local politicians and
not
local
doing
law
that.
Enforcement
No, he's done that. No, he's done that many times. In fact,
they said
on this,
he didn't.
In fact, on this, you're talking about one particular trip. The day after he did that, on Friday at about 3 o'clock, because it was open press, he had about 3:30. He had a full table in the cabinet room of local law enforcement, of pastors, of supervisors from big counties like San Diego, for example, where the supervisor there said walls work. Her name is Kristen. I'm sure you've seen her. And on and on and on. They were a person to person telling us, we need a physical barrier. We also need more personnel. We hope, Mr. President, you'll continue to invest in technology. You're never going to get an argument or resistance from me about Republicans and Democrats not coming to the table. In fact, Republicans promised this president last year that when he signed that omnibus, they would come back and fund border security, and they failed to do that, and here we are.
Okay, so
aren't some of these humanitarian concerns, particularly with the women and children at the border, being exacerbated by people being prevented from requesting asylum?
No, they can request asylum. They make that claim. They make that claim. The point is that the claim needs to be processed. Under the Flores Agreement, we cannot keep these family units beyond the 20 days. And so Mexico has offered to have them in Mexico safely while those claims are being processed. So those claims will be processed, but the sheer number of those claims, according to DHS, means that they can't process them in enough time to meet with the Flores Agreement, which of course is a court opinion that never got appealed to the Supreme Court. I think had that been appealed to the Supreme Court, we'd have better clarity and finality. Between that and Congress not closing these loopholes, it's created a real problem. So they are, of course, excuse me, they are claiming asylum, and then those claims need to be processed. But again, I think Mexico, the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State, cutting a really good deal with Mexico to give these migrants safe passage and safety overall, and work visas is a very big, I think it's a very big deal for them, because it keeps them safe while those claims are being processed. And they are, so many of them are claiming asylum, but that too, those numbers are way up, the number of people coming to claim asylum. I think it's just also a personnel. You can only absorb, so many claims. It's a different flow. It's the flow of the unaccompanied children and the families coming here. One more, and then you can all get warm.
How are those conversations going? Are there conversations?
Well, I certainly won't reveal anything the White House counsel's office has done. You can ask them that question. I can tell you he's doing a fantastic job here, and that he's briefed, he and his team, which is ever growing. I think he's got 17 new attorneys or so. They are they're ready for whatever happens, and they've been very good about briefing any number of us on any number of things that they're working on. Remember, a lot of deregulation goes through their office. Obviously, the judges, all the federal judges go through their office. And anything that comes from Capitol Hill or other offices, they will read that and they will respond accordingly. So we're not worried about that at all.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Stay warm.
Kellyanne.